Hi guys, how are you doing? I know I've been away for a moment, but I'm back. And how are you doing? I hope you're doing okay, and I hope that June is being kind to you. So I'm back with a different topic, a very sensitive topic, but a topic that everyone or affects all of us. And like I said, it's a very sensitive topic, so I will try my level best to be very very cautious of how I put out what I have to share here. So the topic of the day is grief and loss. I know not many people understand what it means. Whenever we hear about loss, we only think about losing a loved one or someone close to us. But loss comes in different forms. There are so many things that bring about loss. And just to name but a few is we can go through loss and grief when we lose a loved one, but we can also go through the same thing when we go through divorce or when we have an illness, and especially illnesses that are that name that I'm forgetting the name, but an illness where you will have to live with it for the rest of your life. Also, we can experience loss through disability. Another thing is loss of employment. It can also come through addiction and recovery, or even major life changes. So, loss doesn't only come through death, it comes in other forms, and those are just but a few of them. And now I want us to focus on the 5 stages of grief and loss. I am so very sure that most of us or many of us have heard about the 5 stages, which are, the first one is denial, the second one is usually anger, the third one is bargaining, the fourth one is depression, and the fifth one is acceptance. So the 5 stages of grief were introduced by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. They describe common emotional responses people may experience after a loss. Not everyone goes through all the stages, and they do not always occur in order, like I have named them. Sometimes you might go through one, jump the other, or it's not always you don't always experience them in order. These stages, I feel like they really explain when someone loses a loved one, or when we are talking about death. Let me start off with the first stage, which is denial. And in most cases, you might find yourself asking yourself or even telling yourself that this can't be happening. That shows that you are still in denial. Denial is the mind's way of protecting itself from overwhelming emotions. The loss may feel unreal, and the person may struggle to accept what has happened. The signs of denial may come differently to different people, and I'll give but a number of them that maybe you might have ever experienced or even seen with someone. Those signs are like feeling numb or shocked, avoiding decisions about the loss, acting as if nothing has changed, and lastly, difficulty believing the reality of the situation. Some people really struggle to believe that something has happened, especially when it's not a good experience. For example, a death of someone. And in most cases, this can come especially if the person was healthy and then you realize that they are no more or they just passed on. There are so many reasons can bring about an unexpected death, and it is usually very difficult. I'll give an example. A person whose spouse has died may continue setting a place for them at the dinner table, because the loss does not yet feel real. And maybe you are wondering how you can help someone to deal with denial. You can help someone to deal with denial in different ways. One of them being that you can allow time to process the news. You can give someone space and allow them to just process the news in their own way. The other way you can help is by offering gentle support without forcing acceptance. And lastly, you can encourage expression of feelings. I hope I've really put it out there as best as I know how. The second stage of loss and grief is anger. Anger, just how you pronounce it. I hope everyone understands when I say anger. So you can, in most cases, we ask ourselves, why is this happening? As reality sets in, feelings of frustration, helplessness, and pain may be expressed as anger. And there are different signs that show. One of them being irritability and frustration. The other one is blaming others, or even oneself, or even a higher power. You find yourself blaming other people, maybe thinking that they would have done something differently. Blaming yourself, maybe you would have changed something, or even blaming the higher power. In this case, God especially. You find yourself questioning them. Why allow it to happen, and so many other questions. The other sign is feeling resentful toward people who seem unaffected. You know, grief affects us differently, and it comes to us in very different ways, and especially because of the relationship that we had with the person with whom we lost, or so you might see as if someone is not really affected by the death, but they are just people who know how to hide their pain better, or it hasn't hit them the same time as you. So you might find yourself feeling resentful towards the person. The other sign is increased conflict with family or friends. And this happens most cases because you feel like people are not understanding you, or they are not being fair, and so many other reasons that may come up along with that. I'll give an example of anger. So someone diagnosed with a serious illness may become angry at the doctors, family members, or even life in general. I'll also give a few tips on how you can help someone who is struggling with anger. One of them is by understanding that anger often masks deeper pain. Most people show anger, but they're actually hiding their pain with that anger. So you try and understand, be lenient with them. The other thing is listening without judging. And lastly, you can encourage healthy outlets such as exercise, journaling, or even talking whenever someone feels like they need to talk about it. And we can go to the third stage of grief and loss. In this stage, you find yourself bargaining. If only, what if I did this? What if I talked to them? What if I didn't allow them to do that? What if I didn't allow them to go on that journey? Yeah, those are some of the bargainings that we do, and especially when you lose people. So in bargaining, people try to regain a sense of control by imagining ways the loss could have been prevented. There are different signs that show someone is in the bargaining stage. Constantly thinking about what could have been done differently is one of them. The other one is feeling of guilt or regret. Sorry. My pronunciation is feelings of guilt or regret. Maybe you feel like there was something you should have done and you didn't do. Yeah. And the third one is making promises to change in exchange for a different outcome. I'll give an example showing bargaining. A parent whose child has died may repeatedly think, if only I had taken them to the doctor sooner, maybe I could have saved their life. So how can you help someone who is struggling with bargaining? One of the things that you can do is by acknowledging their feelings of guilt and regret. The other one is help distinguish between responsibility and hindsight. And lastly, you can encourage self-compassion to the person who is feeling guilty. Let's go to the fourth stage of loss and grief, which is usually depression. You might find yourself asking yourself or saying to yourself, I can't go on without them. This after you've lost the person. Let's talk about it as a person. So in this stage, it involves deep sadness as the full impact of the loss becomes clear. Maybe at some point you didn't understand that, you just felt like losing the person hadn't hit that well, but now as time goes by, you don't do the same things that you used to do with them. You don't see them occasionally. You are not able to talk to them because they are not there anymore. Now it hits deeper, and in this stage, this deep sadness as you are in the full impact of the loss, and it is more clear to you. There are different signs that show that someone is really in depression. This being feeling of hopelessness or withdrawn from the reality or everything that is happening. Loss of interest in activities. The activities that you were used to doing, or the many things that you were used to doing in your daily life, you're not interested anymore, or you don't feel like doing them. Changes in appetite or even sleep. You are unable to eat as well as you were eating earlier on, or you are even unable to sleep. And sometimes it can show as persistent sadness and crying. I'll give an example. After losing a job, a person may isolate themselves, lose motivation, and struggle to see a positive future. That is a good example of someone who is in depression because they lost employment or a job. How can you help someone who is struggling with depression? One of the things that you can do is encourage healthy routines. The other thing is you can help them by seeking professional help, and especially if the symptoms become severe or prolonged for a long time. And lastly, you can provide companionship and emotional support whenever they need it. Let's go to the last stage of grief and loss, which is usually acceptance. So at this point, most people have gone through all the stages, and in this stage, so you are at the point where you tell yourself, okay, this really happened, and what I need right now is to learn how to live with it. Acceptance does not mean being happy about the loss. It means recognizing reality and beginning to adapt even after the loss. Because if we are being honest, life continues. Nothing changes. You will always need to pay bills. You will always need to do other things that you used to do. So with that, you get to a point where you live with the pain, but now you begin to adapt living with it. Signs may come as greater emotional stability, making plans for the future, re-engaging with life and relationships, and also, lastly, ability to remember without overwhelming distress. I'll give an example. A widow or a widower may still miss their partner deeply, but begins participating in social activities and pursuing personal goals again. How can you help someone who is at this stage of acceptance? You can support their new routines and goals. You can also encourage meaningful remembrance of what was lost. And lastly, you can celebrate progress by recognizing that grief may still return at times. I'll give a few points about grief. So we have to understand that grief is not linear. People may move back and forth between stages. Another point to recognize is that some people experience certain stages more strongly than others. Grief can result from many losses, including death, as I had earlier said, death, divorce, illness, disability, loss of employment, addiction, recovery, or even major life changes. And there is no right way to grieve and no fixed timeline for healing. Always remember that. I also want to share now a second part of the same, which is how can people cope with grief and loss. So, like I've just said, there is no single right way of grief. That is, sorry. So, people cope with it differently depending on their personality, culture, beliefs, relationship with the person who died, and the circumstances of the loss. However, some approaches tend to be healthier and more helpful than others. And now let us discuss the health, or let me just give the healthier and helpful ways to cope with grief and loss. So one of the ways is by allowing yourself to feel. That's the first one. Grief can bring about sadness, anger, guilt, fear, numbness, relief, or even moments of happiness at some point. And by moments of happiness is when you have memories of maybe what you lost, and the memories, the happy memories that you have of people you lost or things that you lost. Yeah, that is when we are talking about the moments of happiness. Allowing these emotions rather than suppressing them helps the healing process. Allowing yourself to feel the emotions helps rather than avoiding them or even suppressing them. For example, crying when you feel overwhelmed, talking about your feelings, or even writing them in a journal really helps, because you're able to express what you're really feeling. The second way is by talking to others. Sharing your experience with trusted friends, family members, support groups, counselors, or even spiritual leaders can reduce feelings of isolation. We do recognize that when someone is going through loss or is facing grief, in most cases they just want to isolate themselves, or they just feel isolated. So I'll give an example of the same. Telling a friend, just when you're having a normal conversation, or when you just feel like you can be able to share what maybe you were going through earlier. Like, for example, telling a friend, oh, today was hard because something reminded me of maybe a loved one with whom you have lost in the past. The third way is by remembering the person or what was lost. Many people find comfort in honoring memories rather than trying to forget them. For example, you can look through photos of you and your loved one. You can create a memory book. You can celebrate their birthday, or you can even continue a tradition the loved one once loved, or the loved one always did. The fourth way is by maintaining daily routines. Now this is for your own, your own self. These simple routines, such as eating regular meals, sleeping, exercising, working, attending school, can provide stability during difficult times. The fifth one is by seeking professional support. If grief feels overwhelming or begins to interfere significantly with your daily life for a prolonged period, counseling or therapy can help. For example, or useful therapies that you can do is grief counseling, cognitive behavior therapy, and I think I'll talk about it a little about the cognitive behavior therapy. This cognitive behavior therapy helps people identify and change negative thoughts patterns and behaviors. It teaches practical skills to challenge unhelpful thoughts and develop healthier ways of coping with stress and symptoms. You can also go through group therapy. And lastly, you can go through family therapy. And for family therapy, it involves working with the individuals and their family to improve communication, understanding, and support. It helps reduce conflict at home and teaches family members how to respond effectively to symptoms. The sixth way is by taking care of your physical health. We always know that when your body is not well, even your mind is not well. So, in this case, grief affects the body as well as the mind. And when it does, there are different things that you can try to do to take care of your body. Things like getting enough sleep, eating nutritious meals, staying hydrated, exercising regularly, and even avoiding excessive alcohol or even drug use can help with your physical health, but also with your mind. The last way is by finding meaning, purpose. Over time, many people find healing by discovering ways to carry forward the lessons, values, or love associated with what or who they lost. For example, volunteering for a cause that was important to a loved one. And I will finish off my presentation with a simple message about grief. Many people think grief ends at a certain amount of time. In reality, grief often changes rather than disappears. The pain may become less intense, but the pain may become less intense, but the love, memories, and significance of the loss can remain part of a person's life for many years. So thank you guys for listening to me, and I hope what I've shared will be of impact to someone's life, or it can help someone. If you know someone who is facing grief or loss right now, you can always share this with them for them to learn something or a few things that they can do differently that maybe they didn't know. So thank you for watching. Share, like, and comment. If you have something that I've not mentioned or haven't highlighted, just comment it for someone else to see, and maybe it will work for them. For now, thank you and see you soon. Bye bye.